Welcome, friends, to episode 3 of Quest Rewind, the podcast where we go back in time, we celebrate the 90s, the 2000s, talking about some of our favorite games and consoles. In the past little while, we've been going back and celebrating the Nintendo 64. 2 episodes ago, we talked about the birth, everything before the actual launch, and that in itself was actually our previous episode with that whopping lineup of 2 games, the price point, the first impressions, or first time playing and experiencing, right? Super Mario 64, because that game is an experience in itself. But considering the fact that we only got 2 games in that day one lineup, we thought that today we'll be talking about the games that came out within the first 12 months of the console. So from September 29th, 1996, all the way to September 30th, 1997, we're just going to be talking about the games, maybe the ones that we did play, any memorable experiences with yours truly. My name is Juan Velas. I am from Puerto Rico.
I'm Ryan from Boston.
And I'm Canadian Keith.
And Canadian Keith, I actually forgot to ask you something. We talk about the release dates. More often than not, is Canada tied to like the overall North America release date? Because I would assume so, but I don't want to assume anything.
It's pretty in tandem with the U.S. release for most things, but the odd thing will get delayed a week or two, but for the most part, it's pretty similar.
Okay. So the
it's
format of this
$20
episode,
more, which is awesome.
Yeah,
let me tell you.
I've seen that. That's freaking ridiculous. Especially, we can have a deep conversation about that in the future. But with this, what's going to be happening is we're going to lump up some of the months and then take a pause, react to some of those games, and keep going forward. And everybody, this is definitely an episode where we would love to get your feedback, whether it be on our Discord, link in the description, or Quest Rewind, all one word, on Twitter. So as we talked a lot about this before on the previous episode, September 29th, we got 2 games. That's Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wings. So Super Mario 64, that game needs no more introduction. I am curious, though, because both of you mentioned playing Pilot Wings, but I didn't get a lot of meat on that bone. I didn't get a sense of, like, what was that experience? So could I get, like, a brief summary from either one of you?
Yeah, because there's not a lot of meat on the Pilot Wings bone in general. What do
you do? Do you pilot wings? Are they things that pilot?
You take those wings through some rings, and then you get some dings, and then you land. And that's Pilot Wings.
Is that about it?
I rented this game. I just don't remember a lot about it. Yeah, you fly through rings, and then you try to land on these platforms, right? Don't you try to land on these like target platforms, and you try and get a good landing?
Yeah.
That's all I remember.
It's like a point collecting game, pretty much.
So that came out alongside Super Mario 64. Now, we go to November, and this is interesting because, okay, November 1st, we got Wave Race 64. November 11th, we got Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Not to be confused with Mortal Kombat 4. Trilogy also came out in the PS1. It's a very broken game because it basically has the sprites from Mortal Kombat's 1 through 3.
It's wild. Like,
it's
thinking
crazy.
about
it's just
what
like,
that game is, it's nuts.
Exactly. That same day, we got Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey, and then on November 25th, we got Killer Instinct Gold. But we got to go back to that first game I mentioned, Wave Race. It's still amazing. I played that game a couple of months ago, and kind of like Super Mario with the animation, I remember just being blown away by the fluidity of the jet ski and everything. Right? I know where you're going.
I know.
I saw that face.
I'm trying to be better about this stuff. All right.
Blown away about this game. Keith, were you blown away by Wave Race 64?
Honestly, I've never touched Wave Race 64.
What? Okay, dude.
I've never played it.
Oh my god. Ryan,
I've played it. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know what it is about Wave Race 64. Like jet skis, I've never been interested in riding a jet ski, but for some reason, a racing game on jet skis is just way more fun than it has any business being. This was again another rental for me. I do own it now, although I actually haven't played it. I kind of just, my buddy was throwing out N64 games, and I took them all, and Wave Race was in there, so I should play it again because it's been a long time. But it was just really one of those racing games that was really fun to play, and it was just a little bit different because instead of it being a car or something, you're on these awesome jet skis, and this felt like, I mean, this was the racing game to play if you wanted to play any racing game on the N64 until we got Mario Kart a little bit later. So if you needed to get that fix, this was really that first type of racing game that came out for the system.
Yeah, the arcade racing game is a genre that the N64 just did so well, and this is definitely the first one in a long line of them.
And I mean, one of the best things about the N64 is you got 4 controller ports. So a lot of these games, especially for people that love to go into the arcades, and we'll talk about another racing game that came out in just a month later, but Wave Race, it's the fact that it was small maps, right? Like, these weren't insane maps, but they had checkpoints, and some of the stages, like the waves, were a little more aggressive than other ones, so you had to consider that, but I freaking love that game. Now, when talking about Killer Instinct Gold, if I'm not mistaken, whenever they tagged things with gold, it's usually like an older version of a game. I forget if this is based on Killer Instinct 2. I believe so, because I'm looking at the cover.
Yes, I believe that is correct. It's maybe a little graphically. I'm watching some gameplay footage of it right now, and I missed this one, Killer Instinct Gold, but it looks graphically superior to Killer Instinct. Do you remember that dinosaur fighting game called Primal Rage?
Dude,
that came
of course.
Out? Yeah, this looks very much like that. So I think this was like a half step from 2D to 3D in Killer Instinct. Like, they weren't ready for Killer Instinct 3D yet, so they put this out.
Took a while before that happened.
Out there. Yeah.
Ryan, did you ever play any of the Killer Instinct games?
I've never played a single one. Shame on me. I'm just not a big fighting game guy, I'll be honest.
I had a combo down with Cinder and Killer Instinct that would put a pro to shame.
Well,
that's my story.
Putting pros to shame. Because let's think about this. So September, right? But November and December are key dates because Santa's coming to town in December, right? So you're asking yourself, like, what are you going to get? And keep in mind that if you have an N64, I'm just going to assume you already have Mario, right? So you need the other game. So looking at December...
I don't think you can make that assumption, though, because it wasn't a pack-in.
Well, so that's true, but think about a kid that got it before Christmas. Eventually, you beat that game, right? So you need that second game. Otherwise, it's going to be awesome. But then going to December and then January. In December, we got 2 games on December 3rd, and then nothing else, at least as of this list here. We got Cruisin Usa, which freaking awesome game. I made reference to these games.
What
like
a great game. I love those games so much on the N64. Like, this and California Speed were my jam for a very long time.
I forgot about that one. Yeah. And then the other game was Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. So third-person shooter and racing game. Ryan, what do you think about December?
I played a little bit of Cruisin USA at a friend's house, but never played a ton of it. But I did enjoy a little bit what I played, but it didn't really stick with me in the same way as some of the other racing games on the Nintendo 64. And then I've never played Shadows of the Empire.
So that was it, though, for December. So let's just sum it up. First year, right? Like the official, like 1996. Excluding Super Mario 64, what would you say was the definitive second game as of December?
It probably has to be Wave Race, right? Like, it's still a Nintendo game, but that was like the next in a long line of you need to check this thing out because of this game. Like that, the first big 3D racing game.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Absolutely.
And then let's see here, January, it's always been a dead month for gaming in general, just a lot of entertainment. So we got NBA Hang Time. NBA games were freaking awesome, like NBA Hang Time, Showtime. Like, I I've never been big into watching NBA games, but around this point, I love me a good NBA game. Like I just love the concept of playing a basketball game. What about you guys?
NBA Jam was my jam for a long time.
Did you guys have that written down or something?
Yeah. Well, NBA Jam, it was just a classic because it took the NBA game, but obviously made it arcadey and fun. It was kind of like NFL Blitz before NFL Blitz. And it really was just a fun style. I never played Hang Time, but I don't know if it was replicating that same style or not, or if it was more like a traditional NBA game. But yeah, never got a chance to play it.
Yeah, same here. I never played Hang Time, but there was like a time in my life that came a couple of years later where I loved sports games, and that would be like my go-to game, with whether it be NHL or NBA or NFL. I really enjoyed the sports titles, but that just wasn't at this point yet. But I had played NBA Jam before and loved my time with it. For two!
Oh, wow.
He's on fire!
And those games had like a... Which one could you play as Bill Clinton and all that? I know that was like Super Nintendo, but...
It was Jam.
It was Jam? Okay, yeah, I forgot about that. And I forgot to mention that we are specifically talking about the North American lineup. Obviously, Japan, Europe, that's going to be looking a little bit differently. But now, February. Now, this is a month because we got 4 games this month, starting with February 10th. Mario Kart 64, nice, cute indie game, right? We'll be talking about that one in
nobody's
just
ever
a
touched,
second.
Nobody played that ever.
Then February 28th, one of my favorite N64 games. We got Blast Corps, also from that's from Rare. Then that same day, we got 2 more games: FIFA Soccer 64 and Turok Dinosaur Hunter. So in 1 month. And in this case, 2 of the games came out the same day. We have, whenever you bring up like the top 10, top 15 N64 games, I feel like 3 of these games are in there. So it's Mario Kart, FIFA, and Turok, definitely. But yeah, talk to me, guys, about February and that pretty amazing lineup, considering we don't have a whole lot to play up until this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is really when business started to pick up for the N64. It's almost unfortunate that these games didn't come out before Christmas, because
Can you imagine
could
this
the
in
N64
Christmas?
could have had a holiday season if that was the case. But before talking about them, one, could you sell me on Blast Corps a bit, because I don't get that game. I'm
unfamiliar with it.
Yeah,
as
I'm
well.
not familiar with it.
Put it this way, like I really didn't get it as a kid, because at this point I was still learning English, and I know there wasn't like a whole lot of text, but I didn't understand the concept. Essentially what it is, it's a destruction game where you have specific missions, which is, hey, you got to destroy this building, or you got to be able to clear this path before a specific
unit
like or
Rampage or something. But
no, because you're actually using like construction vehicles and all that stuff. So what's cool is you don't just smash through the buildings. You have to get a little bit more creative. Like you got to be able to drift, and then as you're drifting, you break the building with the sides of your vehicle.
Oh, that's cool.
And what's cool is a lot of the missions is so you can go around the whole map. But then there's a specific computer control thing that's automatically moving. So you got to make sure that whatever objective you got to do, you do it before the other thing clashes. Otherwise, you fail the mission. It's clunky and weird, but it's one of those games that, oh man, I did really bad. I got to go back and improve. It's one of the games that when Rare Replay came out on Xbox, it was like the first game that I played from that, just because I was afraid, like, oh man, I enjoyed this as a kid, and it's still surprisingly fun.
I didn't realize it was a Rare game either.
Huh.
Yeah. I would love for you to check it out, and then we could talk about Rare in a series or something. Yeah. That's yet another option.
That would be a great one to do for sure.
Definitely.
I am in on this idea.
So what about Turok Dinosaur Hunter?
I'll chime in first because I have probably less experience than you guys on this one, but I did own this game. I remember my sister was kind of convincing me to get it. I don't know if it was my birthday or whatever, that I got to choose a game to get. but I remember it's an M-rated game, and it might have been one of the first M-rated games I ever owned. But I, at this point, was not used to FPS games at all. So it was very confusing for me to control. Like the fact that I had to use the C buttons and stuff to like move the camera, I didn't get it. It wasn't really making sense to me. And I was just like, I was afraid of this game because I was afraid of the dinosaurs, basically. So
That's amazing.
I never played more than like a little bit at a time. And I got my ass handed to me every time I played. I don't think I ever beat the first level because I just was so bad at it. But it was a game I wanted to keep playing every once in a while, but I was very intimidated by it. So I never ended up really getting to appreciate and enjoy the game.
Mm-hmm. I didn't have much of an experience with Turok 1 as a kid, but minus the fear, my experience with Turok 2 mimics Ryan's Turok 1, where I played a lot of that game. I was never good enough to get past the first level, but I really enjoyed playing it, and I thought the dinosaurs and the different weapons that you got, because they didn't really... This was a time before there was the cookie-cutter first-person shooter, because this really was new ground. You didn't just have the assault rifle and the pistol and the shotgun. You were playing with things like the bow and arrow and the gun that brains somebody, the cerebral bore and the flamethrower and the missile launcher. Like, it was very out-of-the-box style weaponry in the Turok games, and it was awesome.
It really was great and super fast-paced. At this point, I had actually played a lot of first-person shooters on PC. So this was like one of my first times being like, whoa. Not sure if this is good for console, but hey, Turok's pretty great. Now, lumping March through May, on March 31st, we have Doom 64. And that game... not to be confused with any of the other Dooms. I also thought this as a kid. I just thought Doom 64 was a port of Doom 1 or 2. No, this is like a full custom-made game for the Nintendo 64. To the point
I did not know that.
Yeah. To the point that they actually just ported this, as of this recording, like a couple of months ago. And a lot of people said, like, this was an amazing game. And I think I rented it like one time, but I really didn't play it too much. On May, we also got War Gods, which War Gods I actually did play. It's a 3D fighting game, and I remember being, I'm going to say like obsessed with it just because I thought it was a good game, but deep down I knew it sucked. I knew it was a really bad fighting game. But it's one of those things that's like,
you just didn't want to admit it. You didn't want to admit it.
I don't know if it's, I don't think I bought it. I'm pretty sure it was a rental. But then that same day, we got Hexan. And this game I never played.
Yeah, I was a Hexan kid. I loved that game.
So this is kind of like Doom, right? First person, similar style.
It's like a Magic Doom. Like you had spells that you cast and stuff instead of missile launchers. But it played exactly like Doom. So if you like those games... Hexan was an all-right one of those.
So it's interesting that we got two games in that span that are not just in the same genre. We're going to say it's like very, very similar.
Yeah,
and then we did get a fighting game. Because really, just scrolling up, with the exception of Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct, wow, that was quite a while before we actually ended up getting another fighting game. And here's a new IP, right? War Gods is from Midway. Same thing as Doom. Ryan, in your case, did you experience any of these?
Doom 64, I may have rented, but I think much like you, I didn't really get that far or play it that much. And then the other two games are, I feel like I'm hearing for the first time today. So there you go.
Look up some gameplay of War Gods, and you'll think to yourself, okay, this totally came out in the first 12 months of the console.
Yeah, I'm watching some right now as we're talking, and it's fully 3D, and I gotta give it a couple of points for that, because Killer Instinct Gold wasn't quite there yet. It was like 2.5, and Mortal Kombat Trilogy was a port of the 2D Mortal Kombat games. Like, War Gods was a decent trailblazer.
I'm just gonna throw a name out there. I'll be surprised if either of you know about it. If I say Biofreaks, does anybody
I've
feel
heard
anything?
of Biofreaks.
Biofreaks is another. It's like if Smash and Power Stone had a really crappy baby that they did not want, then it would be Biofreaks.
No, shout out to the trash baby.
That name kind of goes along with your analogy, right?
Now, going over June through July, we are in the summertime, folks. June 30th, this is the game we'll actually be talking about 2 episodes down the line, Star Fox 64. And then 2 games I have no idea about. July 10th, Dark Rift. What the hell is Dark Rift? Let's see here.
I've never heard of that game. This
I'm
is kind of where the shovelware started to come out.
I played this. It's another crappy 3D fighting game. I got to ask this, and I'll start it with you, Keith, because I think we're going to go down a similar path. The Trident in fighting games, not Smash. Talk to me about that.
It has to be Street Fighter. I'm talking 1996 here in N64 times. It has to be Mortal Kombat, Killer Instinct, Street Fighter, right?
Wait, Street Fighter? What? We got a Street Fighter in N64?
I thought you meant like the Trident of fighting games in general.
No, I meant like the controller. Okay, we were totally disconnected.
We're definitely going to go down the right path. I think you were talking about
the weapon, a Trident weapon in a fighting game.
Really should have picked a better
controller
word here.
in fighting games. It was a bad combination.
It was awful. Just the way that, like, that was when I used the claw grip. I don't know if you're familiar with it, and you had your 2 hands kind of pinching the controller in different areas.
It was bad.
That's what I did when I played fighting games on it, and no one should have had to put their poor hands through that.
Ryan, talk to me about your favorite memories with International Superstar Soccer 64.
My favorite memory was never knowing it existed.
Hey, it was from Konami. I mean,
yeah, still that's
you can get some pachinko machines.
It's a title in a long line of Konami soccer games, though, right? Like that is something that carried on for years.
Okay,
and
you
years
know what?
And years.
Let's have some fun here. International Superstar Soccer 64. IGN reviewed it from 1 to 10. What do you think it got?
A 6.4.
IGN, I think they gave it a 7 out of 10.
They gave it a 9 out of 10.
Wow.
So who are we to judge International Superstar Soccer 64? Now I'm just curious. Dark Rift review IGN. Let's see here.
I didn't even realize they were reviewing stuff back then.
Yeah, dude, internet goes way back, way deep. It got a 5.4. So yeah, Dark Rift. Yeah, Dark Rift indeed. Let's see here. Now we go over to August.
Yeah, now business is picking up, folks.
Yeah, so it's a case where, well, actually there's 2 games in here, but then there's the one game that really, it's like when you bring this game up, everything else is largely irrelevant. So August 11th, we have Tetrosphere. Did anybody here play said Fear of the Tetris?
Actually did play Tetrosphere. It wasn't as a kid, but there was a point in my life where I was really into Tetris, and I wanted to see all the weird ways they tried to reinvent Tetris.
Because it was like a 3D globe, right? As opposed to
if you're not familiar with it, like traditional Tetris, your columns and you're filling the blocks, somebody went like, what if we brought Tetris into the 3rd dimension? We're gonna make it it's a Tetris sphere.
Whoa.
Tetris sphere. You're gonna fill the sphere in Tetrosphere.
Do you feel the
and
sphere,
it was garbage.
Ryan? Do you feel it?
I did not feel it. I really didn't play Tetris until much later, so
yeah. You know,
I was not a puzzle game kid. I was very I'll be honest, I was like a very like one note, like just give me the platformer game or whatever. At this point, I had not yet expanded my horizons, so I was very limited in some of my selection.
I think Tetris is the most like gold star example of if it ain't broke, don't fix it in video game history. Like, the best version of Tetris is still the original one. You try to make it a sphere, you try to add some new bricks, it just doesn't work. It's just the original formula. That's all you need. And when they make good versions of that formula to this day, they are some of the best games on the market. I love Tetris.
Well, Keith, you talked about gold. Ryan, what do you think about eyes? What's your thing? Just it's so bad. August 25th, when the eyes are gold. You got 3 numbers, Ryan.
Oh my God.
Oh my. This
okay,
is
Goldeneye 007.
Okay,
what are the best games?
007, one of the greatest games for its time. This was a game that I played a lot at friend's house. It was the FPS party game, basically, until Halo came out, I think. For consoles, I should say. I played this a ton with friends doing the multiplayer, and then eventually, I think I got mine like 98, 99. I finally got my own copy of it. I probably didn't get it till like 2 years later, but I remember it won like Game of the Year like 2 years in a row. Even it was like the games that came out the following year were just not good enough, and GoldenEye won again. They were just like, this game's still better than those games. Yeah, this, you know, you think movie games generally they had a bad history, but this was just a banger. And it was, with N64 having 4 controller ports, the multiplayer was just the best multiplayer for a console first-person shooter. And then not only that, but the campaign mode was actually really fun to play too, and the levels were really interesting, and you had all these objectives, and it just was a recipe for an incredible game that just kind of came out of nowhere and people loved.
GoldenEye was my first experience playing the N64 at a friend's house, playing the multiplayer, and it's just incredible how good this game is. Like Ryan said, every area of it is just like top of the line for its time. The campaign was amazing. They managed to fit the story of GoldenEye 007 into this game in a fun way, with the different mission objectives and the replayability of single player by adding on objectives as you increase difficulties. Like, that was a very cool thing that the game did. And then the multiplayer, not just having a arena for people to shoot each other with, they had all these different modes and options in it that you could play all of these different, like, you could play with the same people and have 20 different games depending on the options that you choose. Like, if you did proximity mines only, or slappers only, or if somebody was winning too much, you could make them choose jaws and then they were an easier target. Like, there was just so many options in GoldenEye. I would get why it would win Game of the Year 2 years in a row, because it really is one of the best games, I would say, not even of its time, but of all time.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting is, let's look at what we talked about, you know, within these 10 months or so. So when it comes to first-person shooters, you know, Keith, you played Hexan. That came out less than 3 months before this one. So just think about the technical difference, right? Like, we're not saying which game is better or not.
Because Hexan is kind of a rehash of a formula that already existed. But with GoldenEye, it was just such a step above. Like, if you, graphics aside, if you took something like Doom 64, if you took something like Hexan, you could pretty much do the same thing in Doom, right? Like, it wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire with what it was doing, as good as it was. But when you look at something like GoldenEye versus what they were doing, like, this was an entire reinvention of the first-person genre. Not only was it a good game, but it was like a game that moved things forward.
And I think it was very similar to Mario because, okay, Turok was 3D, great game. People still play it, but Turok, I feel like a lot of people love it for its jank. Like, you could tell it was still, okay, it's a first-person shooter, but it's kind of empty. It works. But then Goldeneye said, okay, no, this is a cinematic first-person shooter experience on the N64. Like on the previous episode, I talked about one of my favorite things with Super Mario 64 was not even progressing through the game. It was understanding the feel of the character. When I played Goldeneye, the thing that really stuck out to me was how the character had weight. Like in Turok and other first-person shooters, I felt like the character, you're just a floating weapon. But with Goldeneye, like the walking, everything about it, from
and when you
how
got
you
shot
moved,
and you went,
and the blood, it's like it's the details.
Yeah,
it was so freaking good. It was so freaking good. And what did you guys think about that? Because Goldeneye to me really was the first cinematic game. And I'm not just saying because it's literally based off a movie. I mean, how many games we've seen based off a movie that they strip out the cinematic part? Yet here, it's like the cutscenes were very uncommon still. Like at this point, a really good 3D cutscene, and you know, it's not like full of dialogue, but when you look at the dam, right, and James Bond is about to jump down, I remember just like being, wow, this is amazing. Like I'm seeing him, and it's like maybe what, a 10-second cutscene or something, a clip, but it makes you feel like you are playing James Bond as opposed to here's a generic character. Did that mean anything to you guys?
I wonder if one of the reasons, because they had to do the cutscenes, right? Because N64 wasn't good with having like videos in it, like the PlayStation. You couldn't have like full motion video in it. So
Probably.
they had to do the cutscenes, but the cutscenes definitely helped, and they did a good job of actually following the events of the movie really, really well. So then that was so much so that I went and like rented the movie because I played the game before I even saw the movie. And even more fun with that was because of all the cheats that they added, you could have like big head mode in and then see all the cutscenes with James Bond having just like a massive head. And I remember, I think he just like couldn't even like grip the helicopter right in that final cutscene because of the big head. Like it was just it just had a great combination of good single player, great multiplayer, and then just all these little bells and whistles to just make it even more fun.
And I think the other thing we got to talk about is this came out August 25th, 1997. Do you guys remember the year the film came out?
I have no idea.
95.
95.
So the film,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like it came out 6 months ago,
right? With the release, yeah.
So just imagine that. It's like you had to sell people on, okay, we got to make at least a halfway mediocre game based on a movie that came out over a freaking year ago from a genre like the first person genre, with the exception of like, look, you don't have a reference here. You have like what, 3 games that have come out. So much like the speculation that we had on the previous episode of like what we have gotten Donkey Kong Country 3 had the N64 not been delayed, here it's like, could you imagine if they had just said, Keith, like the movie already came out, let's just scrap the project. And something that was fascinating to me about this game, I actually saw a lot of documentaries. Most of the developers from this game, this was their first game that they had been working on. Like a lot of them didn't understand. It's like, oh, of course this is how you would make a game. So it laid the foundation for a lot of companies to say like, maybe we do need some people with an outsider's perspective, because they saw the movie and they're like, well, we got to make the movie like the game, so we just got to make it happen. And we got one of the best games of all time, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating how just that unique perspective, like how I was talking about earlier, where it was somebody that, or it was a game that kind of pushed the industry forward, at least the first person genre part of the industry. Like, I bet you a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that it was a lot of these developers' first games and not really being accustomed to making the norm, to really like following that Doom formula. So it's cool to know that, and how, and like talk about starting the show with a showstopper, right? Like if Goldeneye is your first game, what do you do from there?
Well, good thing it's rare, and they just kept putting out bangers.
Rare. Man, just, Rare so freaking
I miss
good.
the
I
old
guess you
Rare.
go to Pinata Islands. That's where you go next.
Yeah. And did you guys hear about the whole process? Like there was I think it was for 360. It's been like fully dumped. Like there was a full-on remaster that was made but never released, and they found the code, and it's like fully playable.
There was a time in the mid-2000s where it kept popping up. Like there was a time where it was going to end up on Xbox Live Arcade, and then it was going to be on the Virtual Console, and then the Rare Replay. Like that game just was supposed to be everywhere, and just
and it
for
was just
whatever
last
reason.
year.
And there was also Wii made like GoldenEye Rogue Agent, like on Nintendo Wii. They were trying to like capitalize on the nostalgia of GoldenEye. Just didn't hit the same.
Great game though. And that was once again in August. And another game in August is MRC Multi Racing Championship. Ryan, talk to me about like your top 3 moments playing that game.
I loved getting the championship through multi-racing. That was a lot of fun.
That was good, though. That was my favorite part. I got second place. I have no idea what that game is.
Yeah.
And the reason we spent a lot of time in Goldeneye is like, after this, the year just takes a massive dip.
So I got some stuff to say about the next game, at least a little bit. So September 30th, 1997, we get Clay Fighter 63 and a third. Now, I don't believe I actually played this specific Clay Fighter, but I remember playing, I think there was 2 Clay Fighters, 2 or 3 on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah. There was 2, and I loved Clay Fighter on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, me too. I was a big fan, and I think my sister and I even actually did beat the first Clay Fighter. I think the final boss was this weird like circle or something.
Yeah,
the graphics freaked me out.
Yeah, but
so weird.
Obviously, the genre, it was meant to be like a parody of fighting games, and they just had a bunch of crazy characters based off of movies and pop culture and everything. But I think they got a little carried away with 63 and a third. And the reason they call it that is I think there was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with like the Naked Gun franchise, like with Leslie Nielsen. And there was, I think the third one was called like 33 and a third. So they were kind of playing off of that. Instead of 64, they do 63 and a third. But if you look at the roster of Clay Fighter 63 and a third, it's like, there's some straight up racist characters in this game, so it did not age well. They have Kung Pao, which is a very racist Asian stereotype, and then I think there is also a like voodoo character that I think would not also pretty racist based on today's
remember, like, it's kind of where failed platform protagonists went to die as well. Like, I think Booger Man was a character in this game.
Earthworm Jim was in this game.
Yeah, Earthworm Jim.
Exactly.
Apologies.
Wow, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's a shame.
We got to kill off these characters. Hey, we got that Clay Fighter game. And this game, like on IGN, what was the review? It got like a 3 point something. It's like super low score.
It's really disappointing because I was a big fan of that first Clay Fighter game. Like Ryan, I played a lot of it. Shout out to Tiny, the pro wrestler. He was my dude. And I've never played this one because I remember looking at it and saying, well, that doesn't look great. So I let my memories of Clay Fighter live in the 2 dimensions.
Poor bad Mr. Frosty. But I think the Super Nintendo was its heyday. Interesting note, though, is I think they did eventually come out, because we'll probably never talk about this game again. I think they came out with a special edition called like Sculptor's Cut, and that's actually
expensive.
Yeah, it's one of like the rarest N64 games out there.
Because I think it only came out like in a block, but you could only buy it at like a specific store, and it was very low stock, from what I remember.
Yeah, so it's just one of those like for N64 collectors. It's one of those like
Holy Grail.
Holy Grail. That's the word I was looking for.
And then you mentioned that game. We also got 2 other games that day: Extreme G and Pole Position. Got to add F1 because otherwise those 2 games back to back. That That wording is interesting. So
Yeah, I love
Extreme
getting
G,
an Extreme G on the pole position.
yeah, I will clarify. Extreme G is a motor racing game, which I am looking at the screenshots. I always saw the box art, but I never played it. So kind of feels like an cheap F-Zero before F-Zero on the N64. Did anybody play that?
Nope.
And then F1, I'm just going to assume none of us played this game.
Correct.
And we ended the episode. That's it.
Yeah, and we really go out with a bang there. But there's a couple of genres, like looking at the year as a whole, there's a couple of genres that I think are very prominent and fascinating that they have both good and bad examples of each other on there. And that would be like fighting games. You started to see the potential there with stuff like Killer Instinct and the Mortal Kombat trilogy for things that were like that would come later. And then even the racing genre, you have good and bad examples of that genre in this first year. And then shooting games, same thing. You had your games that kind of were status quo for shooters, and then games that just changed the entire industry. Like that, if you were to sum up the first year of the N64 into what came out for it, like it's those three types of games, really.
True. And don't think we forgot to talk about a game that I briefly mentioned, but I was like, I know we're going to talk about GoldenEye, so let's talk about that first, and then we are going to go back to February 10th. Because one game we just mentioned but did not discuss is Mario Kart 64. So when you look at the big titles of the year, I think they really are Super Mario, Wave Race, Mario Kart. You got GoldenEye, and you got Star Fox, which that one we didn't bring up a lot because that's going to have its own full episode, right? So we're going to be talking about that. And Blast Course for me. So, Keith, talk to me about that kart racer that got quite popular, especially with 4 players.
That kart with the Italian man on it. But I like when you talk about Mario Kart, it's really in a league of its own when it comes to party arcade kart racing games. And Mario Kart
it's a very
64,
specific genre.
Yeah, very. You can cut the kart racer from there.
Yeah,
but
it's like the best of the kart racers with blue shells genre.
Exactly. But it doesn't really make it in the red shell category. There's just one better. But yeah, Mario Kart 64, arguably one of the best Mario Kart games of all time. I played a lot of it as a kid and I loved this game. Like some of the most iconic tracks in it, building off of what they did in Super Nintendo. Great game.
Yeah, I'm trying to, and I'll kind of ask this after I give my thoughts on Mario Kart 64, because I have a question to pose for you guys. But for Mario Kart 64, I just wasn't big on the Super Nintendo one. It just didn't really draw me in. But 64, there was something about it that just made it a lot more enjoyable. I don't know if it was just the visuals, because on the Super Nintendo, the visuals were pretty bland. For a lot of Super Nintendo games looked incredible when you're trying to do that 3D perspective. It didn't interest me that much. But Mario Kart 64, expanding some of the characters, and it was a lot of fun. And again, it was one of those pivotal party games. And I don't know if it's the tracks themselves or what, but I kind of want to ask you guys, what is it about Mario 64 that people still go back to it? Because, I mean, a lot of people will say, Double Dash is the best one, or Mario Kart 8, now that it's been the same Mario Kart for like 15 years now. But what is it about Mario 64? Is it the courses? Because it doesn't really have like a unique gimmick like Double Dash or something like that. So why do people always go back to Mario 64? Is it just nostalgia, or what is it?
For me, I think, like for context, Double Dash to me is the first one that really connected with me. Like you, Super Mario Kart, great game, but I was never a fan of the graphics. I always felt disoriented. I never got that. With Mario Kart 64, I think for a lot of people, that is what they envisioned from Super, but they got it here because even with the graphics, I think a lot of people forget that the characters are sprites. They're not 3D. But a lot of people, it's like when you ask, oh, Ryan, like, what do you think about Mario Kart 64? They think, oh, well, Super Mario 64 had 3D graphics, like fully one. So, of course, the characters are also like that. And that's not the case. So I think it's like this perfect balance of you have a little bit of the retro because of the sprites of the characters. The animation is very simplistic. Like when you go back, this is very, very simple animation. Like, and you have Goldeneye that came out in that same year, just for reference of just how much 3D graphics evolved. And I think it's just like a very solid, fun racing game. And at the end of the day, it's, look, you have 4 controllers and you shoot people with shells. And this is your first time probably doing this, because if you go before February, you have your Cruisin USA, but you're not shooting people from your car. You have Wave Race, which is great, but there's no action. This gave you a little bit of everything, and it was the first one for the console, and at least for me, I think that's why so many people remember it so fondly.
Yeah, the problem with Cruisin USA or Wave Race was that you weren't Mario in it, so you instantly attract a fan base just from having that cast of characters. But I think Juan hit the nail on the head with that one. When you look back at the Super Nintendo Mario Kart, you could see the potential, even though like the racing genre just wasn't there yet. Like, it was still cool getting to race as those characters and being on those tracks, but the benefit of 3D in Mario Kart 64 and just adding a whole new layer and life to these characters and tracks, things like Bowser's Castle. Like, when I think of Mario Kart 64, I think of the Bowser's Castle track just because of how cool I thought it was that you were going around Bowser's Castle and being able to race through it. Like, when you think about that track versus its Super Nintendo equivalent, like, it's tough to compare it almost, just because of how much more life and how much more you're in it, and it feels. This is going to sound weird, but it feels less video gamey in the way that you are like, you can have that extra layer of immersion. Like, you're not just seeing the pixels and the sprites and the weird things flying by it. Like, as a kid, you were there. You were in Bowser's Castle. You were racing on Rainbow Road, which is still very cool. I am a Rainbow Road defender. And all of those different tracks. Like,
I liked that the Peach's Castle level, you could actually drive over to the castle if you wanted to.
That was, everybody did that, right?
You had to. You had to.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I want to go in the castle and play Mario 64. It's like, just put in the game, you idiot.
They have to do like an attachment, like the Sega attachment, like Sonic. You just put one game on top of the other. That would have been amazing. No, but yeah, I think that's the three of us have summarized pretty well, like, the significance of Mario Kart 64. Now, excluding Super Mario 64, if you were to pick your top 2 personal picks as far as your favorite games from the first 12 months, excluding Mario, because once again, like, that is the one game, the default game, which would those be for you?
I would pick Wave Race 64 and Goldeneye, because those, there's a bunch on here I just didn't end up playing, but for those are the 2 games I definitely had the most fun playing. Turok, I was just too much of a scared child to get far enough in that game to really enjoy it. So those definitely stand out to me.
Yeah, I would have to go with Goldeneye, no question, and then probably Mario Kart 64 after that, because for the first few years of the N64's life, I didn't own one. I don't think I owned one until like 1999. So it was very much a go to a friend's house, play these things, play these party games, and then catch up on the games that I missed once I owned it. Like, early N64 for me was GoldenEye, Mario Kart, Perfect Dark, Super Smash Brothers, all party games that I would go to friends' house and play with them.
That's a hell of a lineup, though. And you brought up 99. So everybody that's listening, first of all, if you enjoy this podcast, we used to be called a Cast of the Past. And I say that because if you are checking this out on the podcast feed and you like this, guess what? There's over 2 years worth of content from talking about Grand Theft Auto games, a whole lot of stuff. That is still available in the very same podcast feed and on the same YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Quest Rewind. We really would love to get your feedback as far as some of your favorite picks about some of your favorite N64 games from the first 12 months. And now, what's going to be happening? Because this is episode 3. So in the following one, we're going to be going all the way to the very end of the N64 and more even in present time and talking about the legacy of the console. Like, we can eventually go back and tackle a specific year. Like Keith mentioned, 1999, we could do a 5-episode series or a specific episode. I mean, that year, holy crap, it's amazing. But episode 4, we'll be talking about the legacy. What did that console mean to us? And then on episode 5, we'll be talking about Star Fox 64. So how do you guys feel? We are in the middle episode from this N64 journey. Expectation versus what we have. How do you feel?
Feeling good. You know, we've spent a lot of time talking about the early years of the N64 and just how, like, really it started off slow, and once it pressed on the gas, boy did it go. And it's been fun going through those early years, but I'm excited to see to talk about the legacy and where that car that was the N64 ended up, and then ended off with Star Fox. That's a game that I've never played personally, so I'm excited to check it out.
Yeah, same here. It'll be nice to, we've spent over 3 hours now, I think, talking about Nintendo 64, and I'm excited to kind of wrap up kind of this little block with just talking about the legacy, and then actually going out playing an N64 game, and then just being able to discuss that. Because yeah, again, it's a game Star Fox is a game I have not really played that much of and never beaten, so it'll be kind of a fresh review for at least me and Keith.
Yeah, for me, it's actually a game I played and beat a couple times. So it's one of the rare occurrences where usually I'm the one going into a game.
Can't you beat it
blindly.
in like a half hour?
Oh yeah, but Keith, come on, man, you got to give me something. I mean, that's why.
Yeah, yeah. Don't be proud of this.
Yeah, but everybody, we love working on this podcast. So once again, Twitter, Quest Rewind, if you want to join the conversation, and on the description of the podcast feed, that's where you'll also find the link to our Discord. So up until the following episode, this has been Quest Rewind. Take care, everybody.